Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they released. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Charlie Nash.
Hola.
And Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
I can say hello. I'm sorry.
No. Well, you said bonjour at the last pod, so we're talking about AMORES PERROS, aka Love's a Bitch from 2000. Premiered at Cannes in May 2000. It was at TIFF September 9th, 2000. I turned 8 that day.
Oh, shit.
October 5th at New York Film Festival, and then was released in the U.S. Limited on March 30th, 2001 in 2 theaters and maxed out at 187 theaters. Budget for this is $2 million. Opening weekend made $61,047. Domestic gross of $5.3 million and overall gross of $20.8 million. Top 5 films that weekend. I've only seen one. This is a true 2001 ass weekend. Top 5 films that weekend: Spy Kids, Someone Like You, Heartbreakers, Tomcats, and The Brothers.
Yeah, I've only seen Spy Kids.
I think so too.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, although Spy Kids was a heavy VHS rotation in my household. Someone Like You was like one of those VHS tapes. I don't think my parents ever opened it or watched it, but it was just there in my household. Probably still is in my parents' basement. But yeah,
I will be watching that.
I will never forget that Spy Kids in March 2001, I think I saw it in, was the first time I saw any trailer for Lord of the Rings, and it was a super teaser trailer.
Oh yeah.
And I had no idea what it was because I was like 10. But my dad like practically leapt out of his seat and was like, "No way!" Like, because he read all the books back in the day and stuff like that. And I remember being like, "Huh?" And he was like, "This thing's gonna be huge." And I genuinely didn't grasp just how huge it would be until 9 months.
Same. I remember the teaser poster with him looking at the ring, and I saw that for like 3 years straight, it felt like, where it's just like teasing up to this, and I was like, I guess this is one of those big things. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That and Harry Potter. Harry Potter was Thanksgiving, and Lord of the Rings was Christmas 2001.
Yeah, wow.
There was a video store in Oakville, Ontario, where I grew up, where called Mammoth Movies. It went out of business when I was like maybe 6 or 7, and then for years it was just like kind of like a vacant space. But the one sort of remaining shred of the video store was, I guess, the sign they had up, but also a Lord of the Rings poster that was just like sadly up in the window and just like empty space. But yeah.
Wow.
Anyways, number 1 song in the U.S. is Butterfly by Crazy Town. You goddamn right it is.
Do any of you remember when that t-shirt was on sale in Hot Topic? That thing was like, everybody had that t-shirt.
No, but I want it now.
It was with the girl with the, with the lollipop in her mouth.
Yeah, the gift of gab. Yeah. Shout out to Orange County. Number 1 song in the U.S. this week, Walk On by U2, which I don't even think I've heard that. So, like I said, Canada is just going nuts for U2. Plot description from Google: AMORES PERROS is a bold, intensely emotional, and ambitious story of lives that collide in a Mexican City car crash. Inventively structured as a triptych of overlapping intersecting narratives. Just so many words you're putting in there to reach the word count. AMORES PERROS explores the lives of desperate characters who are catapulted into unforeseen dramatic situation, instigated by the seemingly inconsequential destiny of a dog named Coffee. Makes it sound like they wouldn't have gotten into this car crash if it wasn't for this fucking dog.
Well,
I mean,
it kind of seems like
yeah.
it is, because like it's like she let him out, and then like it all like went from there. It's like that's kind of the implication of the movie. It's like one minor decision sets off a whole chain reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, but Iñárritu never went back to that whole thing about how coincidences and people in pain equals profound drama. No, he never went there.
We will get to it. My brain still hurts from doing research. Written by Guillermo Arriaga. Arriaga, my bad. His first script. After this, if you ask Iñárritu, Arriaga didn't co-write 21 Grams in Babel. So after Babel wrapped, Iñárritu was mad that Arriaga's name was on both 21 Grams and Babel and sought solo credit as writer-director of those two. Following this dispute, Iñárritu banned Arriaga from attending the Cannes screening of Babel. Cool guy.
Sounds like kind of a dick move.
Wow.
What the fuck? Yeah.
I mean, it kind of reminds me when Tarantino was just like, please, Roger Avery, I don't want your story by credit on Pulp Fiction, please. I might try to sue you.
But also, do you want to do my podcast?
Yeah. Well, Quentin, have you seen Rules of Attraction? Never mind. Anyways, directed by Alejandro G. Iñárritu, his first feature after this, 21 Grams in 2003, Babel in 2006, Beautiful in 2010, didn't see it. Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance in 2014, which he won Best Director for, and The Revenant 2015, which he also won Best Director for, and who could forget Bardo: False Chronicles of a Handful of Truths from last year.
You also won Best Picture for Birdman. Let's not forget the top prize.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Over
yeah.
Boyhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over
And
Boyhood.
Grand Budapest Hotel. You know.
And Grand Budapest Hotel. A lot of 2014 was a good fucking year, and Hollywood loves movies about people making art, even if it's not a movie. It's a
But Charlie,
stage
it
play.
looks like it was shot in one shot.
Oh,
And the way that they did that was people keep going into hallways so they can cut.
Oh yeah, where it's a dark room where it's just pitch black, and then it's the easiest way to edit a fucking movie. Yeah. Oh my god, give that movie best editing. There's 7 cuts in that whole fucking thing. Jesus Christ.
I also didn't know that it wasn't until like Birdman that he started working with Lubezki. I thought like it was Prito who shot like most of his movies up until that point. I forgot that it was. Anyways, so it's just interesting. I associate Lubezki's like sort of style with like Iñárritu. It's like it's only 2 movies. That's interesting. Yeah.
Who
Hey,
shot
all that
Bardo?
stuff that you did with Malik, can you do that for me and make it more important than anything on the page or that I'm wanting to film? Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. It was Darius Kanji who shot Bardo.
Oh, hell yeah.
Good
Oh,
DP.
hell yeah.
He gets good cinematographers.
Oh, he's a great cinematographer,
Yeah.
Darius Kanji. No. Iñárritu is not without talent, and he knows how to fucking shoot something, but Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually misleading considering what I'm about to say about this, but whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to premiere a movie and people are just like, no, don't like it. And he's just like, okay, I can take probably like, I don't know, 30 minutes out of this and it should be fine. Like, yeah.
Do you also remember the 2015 Academy Awards, which technically aired at like March or February of 2016, where anytime he also won Best Director over George Miller for Mad Max Fury Road, which, Jesus. But anytime that movie won a technical award, whether it be editing or whatever, there were always shots of him like on the aisle row, just kind of like side-eyeing them. And it's like, dude, you won Best Director last year. Like, shut the fuck up.
Notoriously cool guy. He called superhero movies a genocide of the film industry. So yeah.
Well, look, I'm not gonna disagree with him on that, but
but it's a little
no, it's hyperbolic. Jesus Christ! I mean, yeah, it's like okay, we agree on that, Iñárritu, but Jesus, like pull it back a little bit here.
Yeah. Starring Gael Garcia Bernal as Octavio. This is his first movie. After this, Y Tu Mama Tambien in 2001, Bad Education in 2004, Babel in 2006, Blindness in 2008, written by Don McKellar. Vamps and No in 2012. I'm just going to slip Vamps in there. And Old in 2021.
So good and old. My goodness.
He is great and old. He's great in everything you mentioned. I will say Blindness, one of the few films that my friend worked at a Regal in high school. And one of the few films we ever had the whole theater to ourselves for. One of the few films we walked out early because that movie blows.
Yeah, Ebert's review for that movie was like, "Good Lord, the noise in this movie."
It's a hideous movie.
Yeah,
it's so. It literally was us mystery science theorying that movie because we're the only people in there. Like at one point, like Julianne Moore is the only person who can see the whole world is contaminated by blindness, and there's like a blind sex scene between Mark Ruffalo and somebody else, and it's literally them just being like you can't see what I'm doing. It's great audio podcasting, everybody, but like they're literally having a blind like makeout scene, and then the camera pans over like a foot away, and Julianne Moore, being the only person who can see, is just watching it all happen, and we were just like, what the fuck?
That's pretty good.
Goodness.
I thought like blindness was like a metaphor, but no, it's literally
No.
that sounds pretty yeah.
It's entirely literal, and I was the one who was like, no, I've heard, look, this guy directed City of God, guys, we have to go see this. And then everyone was like, the fuck is the matter with you? And I was like, look, I don't know.
Yeah, and I did not know that Amores Perros was Bernal's first film. That's incredible. To come on like with
That's
this, like,
insane.
just the charisma on him in this. Gosh damn.
I don't
He
even
was
think he was credited
he was
by
in
his
like
full
one
title.
short. Wow. It had a different name. Hold on, I'll
Yeah,
look while you're talking.
it's Gal Garcia. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Like, that was interesting at the end of the credits. Yeah, wow, funny.
Also starring Vanessa Banch as Susanna. Prior to this, Highway Patrolman in 1991. That's like a Mexican Alex Cox directed movie. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Need to see that.
After this, the Tommy Lee Jones directed the 3 burials of. I can't even try that.
Esquiadas Mastrada, I think, which is also written by Arriaga. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. In 2005, Emilio Echevarri as El Chivo. After this, also in Y Tu Mama Tambien, Die Another Day in 2003, and The Alamo in 2004, remember that? And also in Babel in 2006. A lot of other people, but we'll just keep it at that. Trivia. Nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. For the scenes where the dogs appear to be dead or dying, the animals are actually heavily sedated under the careful eye of the Mexican SPCA. Multiple dogs that looked like one dog seen on screen were also used so that the same dog was not under sedation for more than half an hour and not more than once a day at a time. The dogs seen fighting each other were actually just playing around, they were just being some guys. Careful editing makes it look a lot more vicious. Their muzzles were also covered with very fine fishing lines so they were unable to bite each other.
It was a lot, as someone who's seen this movie before, it was a lot tougher to watch this movie several years later. As
This
someone who
movie
lives with dogs now.
fucking hates dogs. My God. The first film in a loose trilogy of Death from Iñárritu and Arriaga, followed by 21 Grams in Babel. It's just a downward slope from this movie. Unlike most movies, a disclaimer stating that no animals were harmed in the making of the movie comes at the beginning instead of being buried in the credits. Did y'all see this? Because this was not on my copy of it.
Didn't see it in that version,
Yeah.
but
Nope.
cool, I guess, to have it there, to warn people. Because
Yeah.
Kevin, you said in our chat like you had to stop the movie and look up to make sure.
Yeah, like 5 minutes in, and I was just like, yeah, and then of course, it was like the first IMDb trivia where it's just like, don't worry, and I was like, okay, but still kind of worried. Unlike most just said that, all the images shown on the TV sets during the picture are commercials. These commercials were also directed by Iñárritu. They included a TV station promotion and an ad for a bank, among others. Neat. It took 7 months to edit all 3 story strands together to Iñárritu's satisfaction. When El Chivo's reading the newspaper, one of the ads is a poster for Abre los Ojos. Listen to our episode. And finally, here's something wild. So, as one does, I was watching Alexis Bledel starring film Post Grad from 2009. And the song Si Senor by Control Machete plays. Now that unlocked something in me because I hadn't heard that song in 15 years and it was used on a Levi's commercial back in the day. So that was wild. And then the next movie I watched was this, and it gets needle dropped in this too. And this is not an instance of, I'm watching movies from the early 2000s and Dirty Little Secret by All American Rejects is in it. This is a random ass song that's not needle dropped really in anything else, and I watched it back to back. So
That is wild.
yeah.
This is
Yeah,
also
that
the
is
second.
insane.
This is also the second movie that we've covered on Almost Major to feature a major needle drop by the Hollies, because the Limey also has King Midas in reverse, and this has Long Cool Woman in a black dress.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's right. So yeah, that's all the trivia I got. Initial thoughts, I will go first, and I think all of our initial thoughts are going to be talking about Iñárritu and our history with him. So let's get into this. Iñárritu is interesting to say the least, or not really, but my first exposure to him was Birdman. I saw it in theaters, thought it was a 10 out of 10. I loved it. I remember seeing a double feature that day and going wow, that was amazing. I wasn't even expecting it. But next I got Interstellar, and that's going to be even better. Interstellar sucked, and it still sucks. Okay.
I haven't seen it in almost 10 years. Yeah.
I don't like Interstellar either, so you're in fine company, Kevin. I'm sorry, Brian.
After that, I saw The Revenant, which I didn't care for. Now, for research for the pod, I watched Amores Perros first, and I thought it was fine. Like what I was saying about Red Violin and these kinds of anthology fractured narratives, it's really hard to do because if you can't give us a character that works in such a short amount of time, the overall feel will be weak. I think this movie is obviously better with the first segment and each subsequent one being not as good. Also, Iñárritu is a talented director, and I think for the most part, like, pretty shit writer. I love mean movies. I love watching nihilistic movies that send you home thinking like, well, what's the point of living? But for something like, I don't know, like Fincher 7, that's dark for the entire runtime, but it balances out the nihilism until it hits you in the head. And this movie is just like pain, pain, pain. This person, you think they're good. Nope, they're bad, bad, pain, pain. Everything's bad's happening. Other than to say, like, no matter what you do, everything is hell and you should just quit trying. Now, after watching this, I rewatched Birdman. It's not very good. I watched 21 Grams. It's crime against humanity right there, and Babel, and that's just the most boring, pretentious bullshit imaginable. So I'd say that this movie is my favorite of his, but I still think it's fine, and we'll talk about it more in depth.
I'm just imagining you doing the Bart Simpson book report of Treasure Island and being like, in conclusion, I give this one a 9. Like,
oh man, but yeah, that's my initial thoughts. Bryden, initial thoughts.
Yeah. So my exposure with Iñárritu, Babel was like a movie I'd seen before, but it was like one of those things where I think my parents made me fast forward through the preview when I was a kid because they were like, oh, it's a movie for adults. Beautiful. I remember seeing reviews of on like Ebert Presents at the movies, and it was funny like seeing like a movie by like a director that like was like ostensibly respected get like that was sort of my first idea of like, oh, there are critics who don't like Iñárritu, and now I feel like everywhere I go on film Twitter, it's like people are like saying Iñárritu sucks. But
yeah.
And then Birdman was coming out when I was in high school, so I watched Babel as like prep for that, and then I saw Birdman. Liked them both at the time. Didn't really. They weren't movies that necessarily stuck with me though. And then The Revenant was something I saw in theaters. I definitely fell asleep during parts of it, but definitely found some of the action beats interesting. And then I kind of just didn't really keep up with him over the years. I think especially because like as I followed more people on Twitter, I found like that just like the overwhelming dislike that he's garnered over the years just kind of like made me not want to approach any of his work. Even though I had like some stuff like just sort of like vaguely on the back burner, like, oh yeah, I guess I'll get to 21 Grams and AMORES PERROS like someday. And then you know, we're doing this, so as prep, I didn't get to rewatching some of the movies that I'd seen in high school, but I did watch his short film that he did for that BMW ad series, The Hire. That is like kind of like him at you know, it's funny like how like, you know, AMORES PERROS I feel like works really well as like a genre movie while also like trying to like go for like a larger statement, whereas like his segment for The Hire called Powder Keg is like him like just completely whiffing, where it's like the action is like it's shot in like in Kevin, you might like it because it looks like it's like early 2000s digital video and everything. It's like super like blown out and everything, and like gray looking and spotty, and but like it's the action's like just not really well cut together. And also you have Stellan Skarsgård in the backseat going, what are we doing to this country? So we are making money so that people can have their yuppies can have their weekly nights of coke. And it's like, and then like you're getting like shots.
That's deep.
Yeah, and they're like shots of people like on the street and everything, like looking terrible in their poverty and everything. And it's like, it is kind of the thing that Iñárritu, like I feel like we can, you know, ding him for is, I mean, Charlie, you talk about like talked in our chat about how like you think Iñárritu is like a bit of a sadist and everything, like using people to like using people to make larger points. And it's like, yeah, you're doing that in this short as well, where it's like, you know, these like you're like using these people as like window dressing to make some larger points, like, but you're not caring about them as people. Now, granted, it's an ad for a BMW, but also it's like pretty rich to have like, you know, this like capitalist like critique in a thing that's literally made to fucking sell cars. You know, like the cheap ironies too that like, you know, pop up in his work and also in AMORES PERROS, where it's like, you know, I'm sorry I'm talking about this short and everything, but it is like a thing where like it is like kind of characteristic of him, where it's like Stellan Skarsgård is a war photographer, and then he dies after getting shot or whatever, and then Clive Owen like delivers the photos to Stellan Skarsgård's mom, played by Lois Smith, and she's blind, but her son's a photographer and he specializes in pictures and everything. It's like, oh my gosh.
Wait a minute.
And then you're just like,
I forgot about that, and I've seen this thing too, Bryden.
Yeah, and like, I mean, you see that kind of in AMORES PERROS, where it's like, oh, this model, she has wonderful legs and everything. Then she loses the ability to use her legs, and she has a great view from her apartment, and it's of this billboard. Then she's not able to be a model anymore. Oh, the irony. And it's like, okay, yeah, man, thanks. So like that's like just sort of like the general critique, and like he is a very, like you said, Kevin, a very good director, and sometimes that like his visual flair can definitely like marginalize the people within the frame like to a certain extent, or like sideline them and everything. Like I mean, the other thing I've talked about before when we did our Aronofsky episodes was like how Iñárritu worked on the Montana Meth Project making anti-meth PSAs, and like that's like a thing where like it's like a kid, like it's like a bunch of kids like sitting around watching a cartoon, and like there's a kid who's like having a seizure on the ground, and people are like, this is not normal, but on meth it is, and then like the camera like and then
Shut up.
yeah, but then like there's this trick where like the camera, like it's all on like this one fluid shot, and like the camera goes inside the mirror, and like inside the mirror it's like this like super washed out looking like grungy like room and everything, where like it's like a meth house, everything, and everyone's like looking a lot worse rather than like the clean cut images that we see before. And it's like, that's a cool shot. I also feel like you're like kind of like forgetting the issues of like addiction that affects human beings and everything. I mean, again, it's weird I realize it's maybe a little weird to critique him like in these like for these like 30-second or only like several minutes long things, but it is like sort of his tendency of like favoring style over actual ostensible interest in human beings.
I mean, that's still him, so even if
Yeah.
you're dinging him for that.
Yeah.
He also had, before the BMW one, he had like a short that was like a bunch of 9/11 shorts.
Yes.
I didn't get to watch it, and some people are like, this is gross, and some people are like, this is so heartbreaking, so I'm not sure. I think a lot of it like uses footage of the
Yes.
people jumping and like
It is.
the phone calls and whatnot, so...
Yeah, Ebert praised that in his review of that 9/11 anthology film, and like I've seen like clips of it. I don't think I would want to watch all of it, where it is like you get like flashes and like you hear like thumping noises, and Ebert like said like you realize like it's the sound of bodies staying on the floor, and you're like, oh jeez. But yeah, no. So to make it about AMORES PERROS now, I was kind of so with the stink on him now, I was kind of dreading this, especially with this 2.5-hour runtime. I was like, am I gonna just like find this to be a complete slog? And then the movie just takes off like a shot, like from the start, where it's where, it's Gal Garcia Bernal and his best friend, like driving their bleeding dog and being chased, and it is like it is very kinetic. It's very like lots of like cuts and lots of shouting, and like kind of like you're deliberately thrown into confusion, but like there is like a real sense of clarity and like where everyone is in relation to each other in like this very chaotic event, and it's very well directed.
Basically the beginning of Reservoir Dogs with a dog.
Yeah.
He's talking to the dog. He's like, "You're gonna be okay."
I mean, kind of. I'm sorry to interrupt, by the way, but yeah.
No, it's totally fair. And then like there is like a sense. I think also the Gal Garcia Bernal being just like being like good at playing like kind of cocksure idiots and everything, like in this and Ichu Mama Tambien, he like brings like a nice dose of humor and everything to like the way like he just kind of like confidently like bluffs his way through these situations in the first segment. And it's a very magnetic performance. You can see why he like became a star after this. But and like the dogfights are like upsetting, but I'm glad to hear that like they were handled well and everything. And like it is like effective, like where you just get the quick cuts and everything, and like that's enough. And sometimes like just the way that like you'll look at like Galicia's Bernal's like face and everything, like his reaction to it is like, and how he becomes like more numb to it and everything, where he is like taking drinks of beer as like the thing goes on, and like the movie's not afraid to like have his character be unlikable. Then like the second segment, I think it's pretty good, although it is like, again, it's this weird thing that like kind of runs throughout the whole movie, where it's guys who are like doing these things ostensibly to help women, and then like fucking up the lives of these women in the process and everything. Where Gal Garcia Bernal is in love with his sister-in-law and he wants to help her get away, but in the process of like doing that, he's hurting his dog, and also he's jeopardizing her well-being by like doing all this shit to her husband and everything, his brother, who, by the way, is a demon. His brother sucks.
Yeah.
But like,
he basically becomes Patricia Arquette in Stigmata at one point, is what you're saying.
I was like, is that Bjork I hear in the background? Oh God.
But and then like in the second segment, it's a guy who's like cheating with his girlfriend, and like he like has shittily built this house and everything, and like that's like how like they lose their dog, and also like he's not very nice to her. He's not very nice to her when she's like physically suffering, and then he doesn't really know how to handle it. And then the third segment is like a guy is like the hitman who like is revealed to be like a former college professor who became like a radical and like did a bunch of fucked up shit. and like abandoned his family, and is like, you know, thinking like, can he do good in the world? You know, I guess the question is like, is the movie really viewing the women as people rather than like as complex as the men? And I'd say not really. I mean, especially like, you know, in the second segment with the model, it's like, you know, one of there's like a close up like of her legs and everything because she's a model and like all this stuff, and then like it's like her defining thing is like, what is she without her legs and everything, and it's like, okay, but then the movie doesn't really do anything to show her as much after that.
No. Well, for both, basically the 2-1, for the third one it might be a little bit harder, but both the women in the first and the second segment, they're like the meal ticket to get out of this life, right, kind of thing. It's just like, I can leave my shitty marriage if I be with this model, and then if she's like, hey, I need my crutches, you're just gonna be like, God fucking damn it. And it's just like, okay, relax. And then the first one, Garcia Bernal is very, very good in it, but like his character is just also bad. Like, not as bad as his brother, but he's just like,
he's pretty shitty.
Yeah, which,
oh yeah,
I think he's like a warmer version of a shithead though, because he's like,
right,
he coaxes you into making bad decisions and everything, whereas like the brother is just like, yeah,
not to make this pun, but it's like puppy dog love. It's like my first true love. I have to make everything about her, and it's really, well, it's not really about her, it's about you.
Yeah, and he's pretty forceful with it too, which the movie, like, I think plays ambiguously, where he's like, you know, grabbing her in the middle of the night and everything, with like, and it's like, oh yikes,
while she's like in the middle of having sex with her brother.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like it's just like every 5 minutes it's like, please come away with me, and she's like, this isn't my idea, it's your idea that you want me to have. And they say that like 3 fucking times. And yeah, it's definitely, Iñárritu also has all the women in his movies are either injured or just constantly being injured with pain or something like that.
It's also gotten worse over the years, I would argue, even with more acclaimed stuff like Birdman, where there's that weird fucking rape joke with Edward Norton and Naomi Watts, and like Amy, like that whole thing's weird. And then The Revenant, there's a woman getting raped up against a tree for no reason that doesn't need to be there, where it's just like, what the fuck are you doing,
Naomi Watts and 21 Grams, just as a whole.
She's a character, but the movie does not treat her well at all either. It's pretty icky.
I guess this movie is like, at least it is taking the men to task and everything. It's just like, it's at the expense of like, the women are not really characters in the movie. But I guess the movie works for me too, because like, it is like, not to say that, like, you know, if he was making just a serious movie, that would be fine and anything, but, like, it is, like, you know, like, the fact that, like, it is, like, a crime film where, like, there is, like, you know, set pieces and everything, and there is, like, a palpable sense of, like, tension throughout it and everything with, like, all these scenarios, which are very high stakes and everything, and I think he really films them well. I mean, even if it's, like, and there's a sense of humor, too, which I think helps, like, alleviate some of, like, the attempts of like the overkill of bleakness and everything. Like, it's not enough that, like, you know, the dog is being trained in dog fighting, but also he kills the hitman's dogs, and not only do they get killed, but also he buries them by burning their bodies. And I'm like, do you have to make it that extreme? I'm like, that's maybe like one thing too many and everything. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like it gets like, becomes more overkill, and like, you know, stuff like Babel, and I mean, Babel I saw and like The Revenant too.
Oh, Babel's hilarious. Just a barrel of laughs, that movie.
No, that's like his most, like, just...
Where she's, like, trying to make out with her dentist, and then also coming on to men naked without warning and stuff like that. And then she's like, why doesn't anybody
just,
love
like,
me?
sobbing, and it's just like, there's no end to that story whatsoever. It's just like, well, you're just going to be sad because nobody likes you because you're deaf. Sorry.
Oh, also,
like,
we got Cate Blanchett, one of the greatest actresses working today. She'll be shot 5 minutes in and then just bleeding out for 2.5 hours. Yeah,
just laying down on the floor, and then Brad Pitt cries while he kisses her while she's trying to piss. Like, what is going on?
Jeez, I forgot about that.
Did she survive that movie at the end of that thing?
Yeah,
I think she does.
Yeah. Pretty much nobody. I don't think anybody even really dies, but it's entire thing is
those kids die. The kid who shoots Cate Blanchett dies in the end of that movie, doesn't he? Because he gets shot down by somebody else, right?
Look, I I haven't seen this movie in like 5 hours, so you gotta be really, really easy on me. But yeah.
Yeah, no, but I did like this movie. I definitely have reservations about it, and I'm sorry I've been talking so long. Sorry about talking the BMW short for so long, but like it is, I can see like the sort of like the warning signs of what the kind of filmmaker that I can see why I would dislike him or why others dislike him. But like he has like a pretty good grasp on the material, and like the visual control behind the camera is like really assured, and like I think works for the most part for like the scenarios that he's filming. Like it's not like it's overly ostentatious and anything. It's like it fits like the tension of the scene. Like when he like tilts the camera as like the guy's like desperately breaking through the floorboards to get his dog. Like it's like it really does place you in the emotional intensity of that scene. I'll stop my thoughts for now because I don't want to be hogging the conversation, which I feel like I've been doing. So yeah.
No, you're not. You're fine. Was I about to say something? No, I was just gonna shit on Babel some more. So before I do that, Charlie, initial thoughts.
So I grew I have a weird relationship with Iñárritu, which I also don't like him anymore now, and I really don't like him now. But I will say Babel came out when I was in high school, and I had not seen it yet. However, and this is going to be a really embarrassing admission on my part. I don't even think I've shared it with either of you, Kevin or Bryden, but like, you know, MySpace was a big thing, and I was friends with my cousin, and, you know, in MySpace there was a favorite movie section, and it was Traffic and 21 Grams were at the top of her list. And I was like, what are these? Because I was like, you know, like, I was like 9 when Traffic came out, and I think I was 12 when 21 Grams came out. MySpace, I started using it when I was 13. And she was like, yeah, I bought Traffic and 21 Grams as a 2-pack at Walmart or something when I was 15, and those movies are fucking
Seems
great.
about right.
And I was like really trying to get into more adult movies back then. And I did not have that 2-pack advantage. It was out of sale, God forbid. But and I will say, I still like Traffic a lot. That's a Steven Soderbergh film, though. It's a very it's you know, especially compared to the way we talk about the war on drugs today, much more conservative. I'm sure I'd find much more problematic elements, but like in terms of these types of movies, which I think 21 Grams also falls into place, and also Amores Perros, it at least has a sense of detachment and a sense of clinicalness that doesn't make it emotionally exploitative. So I saw 21 Grams a lot when I was a kid, because I was also obsessed with films about playing around with time. I remember Memento, still a movie I love, but I was obsessed with that in high school. And I was also riding high on the 21 on the Naomi Watts train, because I had just seen Mulholland Drive, which is still like my favorite movie ever, and was like, she's fucking extraordinary in this. So then I went back and I watched Amores Perros, got that from Netflix. Thought it was a masterpiece. I thought this movie was an absolute masterpiece when I was 15, 16. And then I saw Babel, and then I skipped Beautiful, but I saw Birdman and, you know, The Revenant, and like both of you, or, you know, to a certain extent, I was just kind of like seeing through the window dressing there and being like, Iñárritu, as you mentioned, Bryden, I'm like, I think he just is like kind of loves pain, and not in a way that's like really profound in any way. I think he just loves watching people suffer. And again, because Bryden, you mentioned I think he's a sadist. I do. And here's the thing.
To be clear, that was more what you were telling, and I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And here's the thing. I love filmmakers who are sadistic but are honest about their sadism, who at least have something to say. We're going to cover Dogville at some point, but like Lars von Trier, inarguably a sadistic filmmaker. However,
what?
He puts people through the ringer. However, there's always a sense of something that it is only a movie, or that he is trying to make a statement within the art frame, the medium itself. Like Dancer in the Dark, unbearable to sit through at times. Also a musical. Dogville, we're gonna cover it, set on a soundstage. I mean, Breaking the Waves, less, you know, that's definitely more realistic, but I think that undeniably has empathy for the Emily Watson character. Melancholia, it's the end of the world. It knows how operatic it is. That type of thing. Also, someone like Paul Verhoeven, total misanthropist, total satirist as well. You know, like, always, like, he has utmost hatred for humanity, but always makes it entertaining or makes it something within within the form of cinema to make it digestible, and then also makes you walk away from it and be like, oh shit, I really need to, like, all the messages need to sink in, or in the time being, but you can obviously feel the sting of it at the time, and also see that he is trying to not just lecture you or punish you, he's also trying to entertain. Even something like Darren Aronofsky, I know Mother is a very divisive film. Look, I just saw The Whale and think that movie's utter dog shit. But even something like Mother, I'm like, well, this has a dark sense of humor, whether it even is fully aware of it or not. So I did dread going back to this one. And I have to admit, and I texted you guys like an hour into this, so I was like, fuck, look, I don't like Iñárritu anymore either, but there is a propulsive energy to this thing. It's raw, it's his debut, it's a viscerally alive film in ways that I feel like his other films aren't. And I can see the groundwork for all of the things that he would, like, fascinate on that were the wrong things to take away from this thing. And at the same time, you can't deny that you're watching someone finally dive into, you know, being a filmmaker in ways that I find to be very electrifying to watch. And I have far more issues with this film than I did as a teenager. I don't think it's a masterpiece anymore. I think it's solid. I agree with everything you're saying about the second film, or the second installment. I think the second installment was the most powerful for me back as a teenager, and now I think it's undeniably the most cruel. Again, the issues with women that we talked about. I think that I agree with you also, Kevin. I think that the third story is very powerful, but at the same time, and maybe it's going back and watching it today, having my feelings about Iñárritu now, that it's almost too much. Like, by the time it's like, you're 2.5 hours into this thing, and you're kind of like, I kind of just want this thing to be over, because it is sort of doing the same thing over and over again. At the same time, when you get to that phone call at the end, I can't deny that's pretty amazing.
And the end credits seem is like really good too. Like you were talking about how good the score is. It's a really resonant theme. Yeah, resonant.
Absolutely,
really good theme.
Yeah. And the one thing I will say is, you know, I will say the thing that I forgot about, and the thing that I was worried about is, I will say, I believe, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the actress's name, but the character of Susanna in the first installment, I forgot how resilient she was to Gael Garcia Bernal, and being like, look, you can't just have this wish fulfillment fantasy. Like, I have a life here. I have a kid. I'm married. All this stuff. And I do like that. I do feel like the film, even though she's not as much of a character, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I do think Iñárritu has, to be fair, tenuous or icky relationships with his female characters. At least she is, like, the entire time, like, you fucking child, like, this cannot work. And I remembered it being much more tragic the first time around as a teenager, probably because, you know, I had, I don't know, one high school girlfriend, and that didn't work out because I was 14. But now, like, but that was like in high school, and now, like, watching it here, it's just, it's like so clear from the get-go, like, this thing is never gonna work, and he's just blindsided by male toxicity and ego and power and money, and using and also trying to one up his brother in terms of what it must be like to be a man, which I was not expecting based on everything that I felt about his movies going forward, where I really don't think he's ever nailed that type of specificity about masculinity since then. So I was kind of shocked and slightly relieved to be like, this movie's still good. It's not, I don't think it's as great as I thought it was several years ago, but, like, and as far as the debut goes, it absolutely makes sense that he'd take off from here. It's just a shame that it feels like he learned a lot of wrong lessons from my point of view in terms of what makes a dramatically compelling story. And what I feel like he took away from was, pain is beauty, and pain is profound, and sometimes good things happen to bad people for no reason, and isn't that art? Where it's like, No.
Yeah. Well, as
You're
the end
you're-
of the movie, he says, "Well, we are what we lose."
we are what we lose. But it's like he's consistently trying to put on a puppet show and then tell you he's not the puppet master. Where it's just like, yeah, that's not how things go, dude. You know, like you're the one in control of all of this. Don't just be like, well, it's my characters. Yeah, you're the one in control of all this. Like, shut up. So,
I like the point that you made about sort of how even though the third segment is good, it is like sort of like a matter of pacing. What my question to resolving the issue of pacing is, especially because it seems like the primary areas of interest in the movie, character-wise, are Octavio and Susanna and the hitman, whose name I'm forgetting and everything. Whereas like, and there's
El
like a lot of
Yeah.
Chivo. There's more overlap between those stories have the most overlap, whereas like it's really
Right.
kind of superficial how the second segment factors in, other than
Mhm.
oh, she passes him while he's like walking by with his cart of dogs.
And she has a dog, but it's not
Yeah.
the dogs that are linked from the first and third one.
Given how I feel like that's kind of just speaking for myself, I feel like that's kind of the most shallow segment. Even though there's stuff I like in that segment, it's like well acted. The stuff with the dog under the floorboards is very appropriately distressing to watch.
Oh my fucking god.
Do you
Yeah.
think the movie would benefit?
I would have ripped up that floor 2 minutes in.
No, I can't believe how long it took them. Where I was just like, you know, they keep arguing. Well, I don't have the money. It's like I don't have money either, but I live with 2 dogs. If any dog got outside within minutes, I'd be like.
You were also saying like give the dog chocolate. I'm like thinking that's like dog keeping 101. Like, you know, give your dog chocolate. I don't even know the dog, and I knew that as a kid. Like it's
they give him like 16 like gargantuan Hershey Kisses like chocolates too, like in that plate. Like,
yeah.
Come on, guys.
But I guess my question is, do you think this movie would benefit pacing-wise from just nixing that story entirely? Do you think the movie would lose anything if you cut that story out? Because given how much, like, the first and third segment are the ones with the most overlap, and also, like, feel the most, like, thematically connected, especially with, like, the brother rivalries, and also, like, sort of, like, the sort of men's responsibility to women.
Father and daughter and shit.
Yeah.
Make it a Chunking Express situation where there's 2 stories, and then if you really wanted to do that story, you could make a Fallen Angels or something out of that. Yeah.
Oh, is that how Fallen Angels
Probably.
came about? That's cool. Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's really
I
interesting.
didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I like both those movies.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hot take. But the
Hot take: Wong Kar-wai makes great movies. Yeah.
but yeah, no. And the other thing that you were mentioning, about Susanna, she is resilient. She is technically free from both these shitty guys, and that her husband gets killed during a robbery, and Gal Garcia Bernal is just alone. What do you think about the decision that she's gonna name the baby after her shitty husband who abused her and was like an asshole? Like, I don't know about that.
Contrivance. Yeah, contrivance, grief, but also mainly contrivance.
Yeah, I mean, the way she says it as Bernal's walking away from her, I guess it's just like maybe her putting a final nail in the coffin of like, we're never going to be together. But I'm like, also like, but why would you pay tribute to like this other shitty, like, I don't know. I mean, not to not to like judge the character or anything, but like, it's just like, I don't know. I don't really see why she would make that decision. I don't know. Maybe it's not meant to be a good thing, but I'm like, it's a weird character choice.
I think it's meant to be in service of his character, and that's really it.
There you go.
That's what I think. Yeah. I think it's ultimately meant to be a dramatic blow for Garcia Bernal.
Yeah, because the movie ends on him limping away sadly from the bus station. And like, look, Bernal plays that very well and everything, where he's like just sort of like trying to like fight back the tears while lighting a cigarette and everything. But it's like, and you know, yeah, it's like, why is it ending on him? It's like, yeah,
also,
again, you know.
Also, not to be this person where I'm like, you didn't add this scene, why didn't you add this scene, in terms of that's basically saying, why didn't you make this part of the movie? But it's also hard to empathize with him after that accident, where he makes no effort to even contact this woman who he fucking destroyed her life.
Well, he's like kind of out of it when he's like taken out. I mean, he's like injured really badly, right? I mean, he gets robbed by Chivo during the
but for a
crash.
movie with so much extra shit, it's 2.5 hours in. They don't even try to connect his storyline and his incident with her accident, and they have side characters like, and I'm not saying this is bad, it adds to her character, but you see Susanna's alcoholic mother,
right?
For example, like you have all these side characters, and yet they don't even try and have one moment where he even acknowledges the pain that he caused this poor model. Like, there's none of that.
Which again makes you wonder, why is it in the movie? Not to shit on the segment too much, because like I thought it was totally fine, but it just, in retrospect, in the grand scheme of the movie, it's like, why is it in there? It's because even the third story, you have Chivo like at the scene of the accident, and to be fair, he does try and help, but he also steals money from the car, which I like.
Like that's pretty pivotal to his character arc. Whereas like the first story and the second story, it's just a bad accident, but like. Even in something like 21 Grams, which, good lord, what a misery fest, but, like, at least that's about Benicio del Toro wrestling with the guilt of the accident, which maybe was him being like, oh shit, I should have tackled this more, but, like, it was kind of jarring to me where, yeah, you're right, the characters in the first installment and the third installment intersect constantly. The husband, the wife, you know, the woman who's in the accident, and then the guy that, you know, left. Like, and that's the other thing, is it kind of also very much about, she just has to suffer and be in a wheelchair and be in pain, and her dog, like, suffers, and then he's the one who gets the dog out of the floorboards. I do think that is a very stunning sequence where he takes the hammer and, like, destroys that floorboard, especially after he's like, I don't have money. But at the same time, I'm with both of you where I'm like, why weren't you doing that in the first place? Like, I don't get it. But
it feels like it's like almost a week pass. Like, it's like you just let that dog be down there for like a week almost. Like,
yeah,
like
several days.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I'm shitting on that segment and anything when I thought it was like totally fine. What also helps the movie is like these. I just admire this in a movie, and like anytime like a movie has like a weird like sort of grace note and everything, where it's like you get like a sense of history between like two people who have known each other, like that, the guy cheating on his wife and everything. Very common shitty guy in a movie behavior and everything. But the call he gets from his, when he makes the call to his wife, and she's like, she doesn't get the answer, and she's like saying, "Sweetheart, is that you?" and everything. It's like, just like those two words, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I get like a sense of like love in like in between these two people like so quickly and everything, and that's like good writing, but also like performance and everything. It's like that's like it's these little things like throughout the movie that like those moments of humanity, which which do make the movie sort of. I mean, again, it's like how profound is it to actually have moments of compassion and love in the face of all this fucked up shit that's happening to people. That's not really profound. But it definitely like feels truer to life, and also helps like it go down a little bit easier. It makes it more palatable, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
The guitar score also, I can't deny that anytime that it and it's kind of a samey score, but anytime that guitar score came, even during sequences like her looking out at the billboard, it did work for me. I think that he does. I mean, that's the thing about Iñárritu and his sadism, is like, I think he truly does believe he's making movies about people and humanity and bad luck, and I think he thinks he cares about these people, but what he doesn't understand is that he cares more about putting them through the ringer in order to make them more human, or make the stories more dramatic, which is like, again, we go to the movies to be manipulated. How many times have I said this on this fucking podcast? But at the same time, I can see the strings. I can see the strings so much with his movies. And sometimes I just don't like when I can see how cruel it is. And at the same time, like I said, I liked this movie again.
Yeah.
I think it works, especially the opening. I think it takes like 45 to 50 minutes to really set up Gael Garcia Bernal's character, his brother, his sister-in-law, his mother, like all of that. And then I think that, yeah, as both of you have said, the second story definitely a little more tacked on, works as a short story, but also undeniably cruel, definitely the worst of Iñárritu's traits. And then the Hitman story, and by the time that thing comes around, it's kind of like it's overstayed its welcome. Even though it's fine. It's just, maybe he thought he was going to make one movie and then never another one again. And he was just like, I just got to shoot my shot. And then, oh boy, how ironic.
Yeah, I got 21 grams left over. You want some more? No.
Yeah.
Sorry. But yeah, no.
That's a movie about drugs, right?
No.
But yeah. But yeah, it's interesting too. Like, you know, I've seen like one of the critiques I saw of The Revenant was like, you know, it was Matt Lynch's review of like saying like shave 90 minutes off this movie and like all the shots of like people gazing at like scenery. This would be like a pretty good genre movie. And like it's interesting watching this where it's like, yeah, like he easily could have like gone on to make like just like really competent thrillers, and I would have been able to watch that.
Yeah.
And, like the car chase and like all the dogfights and like that shot, that like the one tracking shot where it's like Garcia Bernal like dragging the dog out with his friend and then saying start the car, wait for me, and then like following him back as he like stabs the guy, and then like it's just like him, the chorus of voices rising in the background. He starts running. I'm like, oh, this is like really, and it's like really exciting, and also like just a sense of scale too, like when that character is introduced, where it's like pulling back and it's just like the hood of like his yellow Hummer that like pops up, and I'm like, oh, like yeah, like this is like you get a sense of like this guy being like a force to reckon with. It's like I don't, it's like just good like storytelling through like visuals and everything. And yeah, it's like I don't know. I mean, not to like knock him down like an ambition or anything. I mean, it's cool that he tries to like, you know, fit more into his movies than just like thrills and like, you know, visual stunnery. But like, you know, I guess it's a question of like, does he achieve it? And I guess like the thing is like, I think it gets there for me, I guess, in this movie, but it sounds like maybe he doesn't quite get there in his later films, from what I'm hearing.
mean, you bring up the car chase too in the beginning. Like that car chase is full of cuts, and it's actually pretty exhilarating to watch. Now, I mean, I didn't see Bardo. I don't think any of us did. Any of us see Bardo?
No, I know people who have though. We know people who have. Yeah.
But like Birdman and The Revenant, it's like, especially with Birdman and what that movie's about, it's like after people were like, he's making the same movie over and over again, he's like, I need to prove how talented I am and how important I am. And his films just reek of like, look at what a cinematic wizard I am with long takes. Like he's obsessed with long takes now, like just to prove that if he can choreograph and block and stage all of this shit, he is therefore an important filmmaker. Where it's like, no, dude, like it's what your movie's ultimately about. Like it doesn't have to do with the subject matter so much as like how it's about it. And if you frame it in certain ways, then we're gonna see that you're just an emperor with no clothes. It's like, you have talent, just stop pretending that you're the next coming of Christ. Fuck, Jesus.
Well, yeah, because something like Birdman, which is very obviously different from his quote-unquote trilogy, and then Beautiful, I really don't know anything about it, but that one is just like, oh, this is completely different. It's not about how a moment changes, blah, 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 blah. That movie still has just I mean, somebody could watch it and just be like, oh, he's definitely like, just, this is all satire and whatnot, and it is, but it still has this air of like, you know, people that are in blockbuster movies are shitty. People that think Broadway is important is shitty as well. And the critics are shitty. You know what? Everything's shitty. Who fucking cares? You know, which it's like this in this movie. It's just like, why do anything? Because something may come along and just fuck everything up that you're not expecting. It's just like, why even try?
Like, why does Birdman have to be made of continuous long shots? Like, you never made a superhero movie. You didn't even make a movie about people on stage. Like, what are you doing, dude? And then, yeah, Revenant, same thing, where it's like, dude, this movie's been made a million times before. You're not impressive, but you have to keep proving to people that you are. And it's like, nobody's saying you're like, nobody brought this argument up to begin with. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's just like if fucking Leonardo DiCaprio like sleeps for 3 weeks inside of a bear, people would be like, what a master. And it's just like, no.
He sleeps inside a horse. Get your facts right. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well then give everyone in Jackass a fucking Academy Award, for fuck's sake. Like,
I am not gonna.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm upholding that. That sounds great. And the award for best Jackass film released this year is, oh my god.
I also have to say, based on like this guy won best director 2 consecutive years in a row, and all I've heard from his last 2 movies, I again did not see Bardo, but Revenant, like, people were miserable, they got frostbite, all this shit. Bardo, people got COVID, and it's like, this guy does not sound like he takes people's well-being into consideration when it comes to film sets at
Which
all.
is like, maybe that's something, I mean, it's just like even hearing talk about the dogs and how they were treated in this movie. It's like, oh yeah, you know, like that's like that is the care that you should be taking. Like, it's like, that's a lesson he should have kept.
Yeah, so when it comes to like seeing how he treats human beings in his movies and then hearing stuff that happens on set behind the camera, it's kind of like, well, that 100% justifies my suspicion that you don't really give a shit about human beings at all. You care about using them as props, which, you know, don't like that. And again, I think this one, he cares most about the characters most of all, but then his ego fucking rose. And his ego rose immediately because this thing played at Cannes, nominated for foreign language film. It was nominated. I honestly think if it was up against any other movie apart from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it probably would have won, which, to be fair, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, better movie than this. But I really think that, like, he knocked it out of the gate with this one, and then he just kept going and got good reviews, and then it kept getting muted, and then he was like, he took a break for like 5 years, and then just really was determined to wow people, but not in a way that, not for the reasons that I go to the movies, and I think people kind of caught on to what a cynical bastard he is when it comes to humanity, without really anything to say, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what critics who like hate his movies now, like, I mean, Adam Naiman, I feel like makes the running joke, is like the critic who's like making the running joke of how much he hates Iñárritu, and along with Jason Reitman, but like I'd be curious to know like what people think of Amores Perros, because I mean, like when I mentioned hearing about Beautiful on like Eva Presents at the Movies, like, and Christy Lemire was like, oh, Amores Perros was good, and like Ignatiy Vishnevsky was like, even he was like, nope, didn't like that one either, and it's like, oh, and, it'd be interesting to know if like people like, if people didn't like his movies from the beginning and why, if it was like for the same reasons, if there was that skepticism, or if it's all a retrospect thing. I feel like I'm sorry if I've sounded like I'm negative on this movie, because I actually did find this pretty engaging throughout the whole thing, and there's good filmmaking for sure.
No, it's the thing of, it's very much, it's like, this is good, but also it is a template for all the stuff that he has run into the ground for everything else. So it's just like, yes, this is good, but it's hard to separate the fact that it's like, oh, in 21 Grams, he just did the exact same thing, but went even harder on the muck and the downtrodden stuff of it, and then Babel too is just, well, what if it's an event instead of it being a contained event? It's all over the damn world, you know?
Yeah.
So it's very hard to be like, yeah, this is good, but also to take the Iñárritu of it all out of it. So it's very hard to just view it as just one movie, because it's the starting point of everything else. So yeah.
He calls it the Death Trilogy too, and it's like, it might as well be called the Pain Trilogy. Like, it's just all pain, it's all human suffering. Like,
isn't this also around the time that Gus Van Sant has his Death Trilogy too, with like,
yes,
yeah, with Elephant and Last Days, and what's the other one? Jerry. That's the
Jerry.
Yeah.
Jerry, better trilogy. And again, I feel like both of you, and completely agree with you, Kevin, and also you, Bryden, where I know on this podcast right now I'm talking about all these things that I don't like about him, and I do think this movie works pretty fucking well. It's just, I have a personal connection where I used to think this movie was absolutely great, and now it's like, as you mentioned, Kevin, I see the blueprint for everything he would take away from it that I do not care for anymore. You know, as time goes on, it's been what, like 15 years since I've seen this thing. It's hard to, God, I was about to be like, I've grown to know some person and he hasn't, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's that's so fucking smug and self. I don't know.
You've grown as a film watcher. You could just say that. I mean, that's the same with me with Birdman. I thought that was incredible, and now I'm just like, well, yeah.
Can I also say that, speaking of Birdman, that last shot totally cheats with Emma Stone seeing him jump out the window, where it's like, this movie wasn't from her fucking perspective. You can't do that. Like,
yeah, there's
like
a lot
she
going
sees
on
him
at the
flying.
end.
She sees him flying, and it's like, oh, how profound. And it's like, yeah, that was never her perspective, though. You can't end a movie on that note. It's fucking bullshit.
Should have ended the movie with her just being like, you don't even have a Facebook page. And I was just like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Or Michael Keaton and Andrea Riseborough being like, oh, we shouldn't be parents. They'd be like serial killers or Justin Bieber. And I was like, what, did my dad write this? What's going on here? We should just have a dog corner. We just talk about how much we love dogs, since this movie hates dogs.
Dogs are great.
Yeah, I felt
Live
really
with two of them.
I really felt bad for Coffee and everything and what he's put through in the movie because like I mean when he kills the dogs and everything, I mean like what the cuts to his like eyes and everything just looking kind of like they're not even filled with mouths. He just looks kind of like they're just wide and open, and it's like you feel bad for him because he's like just an innocent who was like treated badly and everything, and it's you know you hope that like maybe there's like good for him at the end as he walks up to Horizon with the hitman, but it's yeah.
Is that the one honest thing about that movie? Is that dog was... What's interesting too, I know we're trying to get into final thoughts, but like the whole thing about that dog is that dog had the dog fighter sick their dog on him, and then he ripped their throat out, and then he was trained to be this bloodthirsty, cutthroat beast. And yeah, I agree with you that that's an effective scene in the movie, Bryden, because that dog did that in self-defense, but then was trained to do that occasionally. And like, that's the thing, is like, that feels more honest because at least it's like, all about dogs and their environment and being trained to do stuff like that. Whereas like Iñárritu trains his characters to die also. Like,
yeah, I mean there is like the running thread of like resorting to desperate measures for survival and everything amongst all the characters. So yeah, or it's more like the Gael Garcia Bernal and everything, like doing things that you wouldn't think you'd do to like survive. Yeah,
right. And he has to do it just because that one guy is just like, hey, your dog killed my dog, which as a man that makes me feel lesser than that my dog could be killed. And then I'm just going to keep bringing all these dogs and then get so pissed off I'm going to shoot your dog. That guy, also a top-tier shitbag in this movie.
Yeah, with like the shitty blonde hair. Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
Such a good
literally
touch.
Stole those words out of my mouth, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie. Oh my gosh.
No, don't be sorry. That was
Say it at the same time. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Shitty blonde haircut.
Yeah. Here. Also, I didn't like Isle of Dogs. Probably my least favorite Wes Anderson film, but at least we didn't get Iñárritu's Isle of Dogs, because Jesus.
Wow. It'd be like, instead of what is it? All the dogs are like hanging out at a junkyard or whatever. It'd just be a pile of dead dogs. They're just like, yeah, that's the Isle of Dogs. Everything is made of dogs.
You ever feel like life is garbage?
It's like an Andy Warhol film where it's 9 hours of just a pile of dead dogs, and then you just have to watch it in a theater. You can come in and like leave for an hour and come back and be like, oh, mesmerizing. Yeah.
I went to work. I came back. What's going on here? No, it's still the pile.
There's a book I read in elementary school by a Canadian author, Gordon Corman, called No More Dead Dogs, about a kid who wants to stop reading books where dogs die. What if Iñárritu's movie is called just like Scratch Said Noah? It's like More Dead Dogs.
Iñárritu's on doesthedogdie.com is just being like, God, fuck y'all. Like, get out of here. Imagine looking up this movie on Does the Dog Die and just being like, oh no.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, sorry we're announcing this 66 minutes into the episode. Yeah, if you don't want to see dogs get hurt in this movie, don't watch it.
Yeah, it's rough. Because even if they're sedated and whatnot, like they don't look like they're sleeping. They do look dead, like tongues hanging
just, like,
out.
The streaks of blood too that left.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's really upsetting.
And some of the times, like, there's one dog that's like in the back of a truck and they just like slide him out, and I was just like,
yeah,
that's probably not. And then some of them are like grabbing him by their neck when they're like quote unquote dead, and I was just like,
even when they're releasing them for the fight, like they're grabbing like the skin. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And they plop the scene you're mentioning, Kevin, where it's out of like a pickup truck. They just kind of plop it on the ground like hard concrete, and you're just kind of like, Jesus. The other thing, speaking of Wes Anderson and dogs, that I consistently thought of was that scene in Moonrise Kingdom where one of the dogs die, and it's the two main kids, Jared Gilman and Susie. I'm forgetting the actress name.
Kara Hayward.
Yeah. And it's just a shot, and I actually do think this is a really funny line where the dog is dead, and she asks, "Was he a good boy?" And Jared Gilman goes, "Who's to say? But he didn't deserve to die." And that's what I thought about this entire movie.
That's a good one. I should rewatch that movie. I haven't seen it in forever.
That is my favorite Wes Anderson film. That and Royal Tenenbaums.
Mine's Fantastic Mr. Fox, but yeah,
probably
two very good ones that you
5.
just named. Yeah.
My favorite one is probably Bottle Rocket, because it's his least Wes Anderson movie.
I do like that one.
And Fantastic Mr. Fox is just that's a fun
the
time.
Amores Perros of Wes Anderson movies, where it's like it's all the groundwork for what he'd eventually go on to do.
And it's got the Wilson brothers. It's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.